Welcome, everyone, to the Masculine Wilderness podcast. I'm your host, Tom Perez. I'm the founder and CEO of Epic Project. This is an ongoing conversation we've been having now for over a year, and it is about how men can show up in the world in a healthy and life-giving way, not just for the people around them, but for themselves. We have been blessed this entire time to have so many people that bring such a depth of perspective. And today is just another example of that. Pasha Dashtgard is here with us again today. I think you were the first one when we talked. I said, you're coming back. And so here you are. You were distracted briefly by some lame excuse like having a baby and that sort of thing. But I'm
just some detail.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're here. You are now you're the director of research. Is that the title?
That's right.
Peril. I'm not even going to try to tell us what it stands for again.
It is a mouthful. It is the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab.
Got it. And it's attached to American University in Washington, D.C. And so much has happened this past year on a personal level, and we'll talk about that, but also on a cultural, political, national level. Let's start with your thoughts. Just like let's zoom up a little bit. Just like since we talked almost 10 months ago, I think we figured it out about 10 months ago. What are your thoughts on the changes that have happened let me narrow it down a little bit, in the world of men? What are your thoughts on things that have changed?
Well, I think that, you brought me on to talk about this idea of like male supremacy and online radicalization. And I think that we have seen in the last 10 months, the way that has just come into the mainstream. And, Cassandra in Greek myths is cursed with the gift of prophecy. And I do not I empathize with Cassandra here because I don't like to be right. I don't like to.
Is that your pen name?
Yeah. Cassandra. Very, very random reference. But yes, no. So what I would say is what we have seen, we saw the exit polls with Gen Z men supporting Trump at, I think, 26% higher rate than Gen Z women. We have seen story after story about how, Trump was able to use sort of blogs and podcasts and the sort of manosphere, but not even the manosphere, just kind of this ecosystem of interconnected podcasts and networks and websites and apps and online forums in order to really capture the online conversation and pull in a lot of young men and a lot of constituencies that hadn't previously been supporting far-right policies and are now supporting far-right policies.
Well, is it true too that they hadn't been supporting far-right policies, but they hadn't really been supporting policies at all? It almost seems like there's just a higher level of engagement because of all the digital kind of media platforms and outlets, and it's just easier to go there now. Is that, or I'm looking at it from, kind of from the sidelines, but
yeah, I would say that there's a lot. I mean, listen, so what we're seeing is the mobilization of grievance politics, right? Mm-hmm. Where the primary way in which you are entering into conversations about politics and society is founded in this idea of being aggrieved, feeling grievance, feeling like some aspect of society, some aspect of our political culture is targeting you. You are being denied rights or privileges that you were promised. And so now you are resentful and you're angry. And so there's a lot of different types of grievance that we can pull that are being pulled on in order to bring people in and to radicalize people. And so we're seeing this in the male supremacy world with grievances around dating and relationships and, has Me Too gone too far and wokeism and all of that. But we're also seeing grievances around immigration and being losing jobs and losing economic security. And so there's a lot of different ways in which online milieus have been activated in order to really key in on grievance and bring people into their political platforms through grievance culture.
Where do you think the seeds for that? I hope this is not too simplistic a question, but where do you think the seeds for that grievance politics, like where were those planted historically? Do you have any sense where that came from? Was there a period in history, like, in my dad's lifetime or my grandfather's lifetime, where like that became a thing?
I wish I was a
even?
historian where I could
Yeah,
give you like a real accounting of that kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of different places in which this stuff has been seeded. I think that
yeah.
the way that talk radio and sort of like
Mm,
uh the embedding of hatred of foreigners, hatred of asylum seekers and immigrants, that stuff has been going on for a long time. I think
yeah,
about my dad, you know going to and from work every day. He was in traffic for hours, and he would be listening to like just talk radio that was owned by Clear Channel, and really stoked a lot of resentment of racial minorities and ethnic minorities and religious minorities. So I think that there's something there. I
mm,
also think that particularly with young men around feminism, I think that there's been a lot of just as cultural norms have changed around dating and relationships and what is expected of men and women. I think that there have been a lot of people, social media influencers and bad faith actors and people who are opportunists, really stepping into these spaces and saying like, hey, do you feel sort of upset about how your life is going? Do you feel upset about the economy? Do you feel upset about sort of your place in the social hierarchy? Well, I can tell you who's to blame for that.
yeah.
It's the women, it's the feminists, it's the Jews. This is how that.
So, yeah. So I'm wondering, that's one of the things because the F word, right, that gets bandied about, feminism, is. Do you find that the people that are using that as an explanation for why things are so bad, is it actually feminism that they're reacting against in the kind of the traditional sense of that? And I know feminism as an ideology is there's a lot of different variations of it, but I feel like people talk about feminism, but a lot of times it doesn't seem like what they're reacting against is actually what feminism, at least historically, meant.
Oh, I mean, 100%. This is
Yeah,
this is the whole game. The whole game is you distort your opponent's idea and you pick out the worst aspect of it, and then you hold it up and you say, "See, look how terrible this idea is." So
yeah,
often, what's happening is that people are really highlighting, and I'm saying historically, like
yeah,
20, 30, 40 years ago, what has been happening is people highlighting second wave feminist rhetoric as like emblematic of all feminism. And second wave feminist rhetoric is uh, polemic. It's
So
when you're trying
can
to.
you just unpack? Okay, second way. What is that?
Second wave
Yeah.
feminism is like Dworkin and this like kind of 70s and 80s feminist movement and rhetoric, where oftentimes what's happening when you're trying to begin a social movement is that you start by rallying your base, right? You
Okay.
start by like, hey, there are a bunch of us who are being oppressed or being sort of exploited or whatever. And like, how do we get other people who are like us to get together and like sort of raise consciousness, right? Raise awareness.
Hmm.
That's the first step in the process. And so often what that looks like is extreme rhetoric. It's like
Mm.
talking points and slogans and sayings that are
Kind of
meant
designed to like shock you or get your
and
attention. Yeah.
and to stoke anger in the
Okay.
people who are being exploited. And what happens is that those phrases and those slogans and those ideas then get picked up on by opponents and go like, look at how extreme they are. Look at how angry and resentful they are. And it's like, it's not meant to be out in the world. It's not meant to be public facing. It's really meant to be kind of within the community. But because of the internet and because of social media and because of the way our like digital ecosystem works now, we're exposing people to ideas and arguments before they're fully baked. And that causes a bunch of problems in a bunch of different ways. You know, I think about this with like postmodernism. Postmodernism, you know, Critique of Pure Reason, I just looked this up recently. This is why I know this. Critique of Pure Reason came out in 1781. The genealogy, that was Kant. Nietzsche wrote The Genealogy of Morals in 1888. So 100 years between there, right? Yeah. And then 1888, we've had like up until, so Genealogy of Morals like kicked off the sort of like postmodernism as an idea. Hunter S. Thompson was like writing in the 80s, right? Yeah. Like it took 100 years of philosophers and artists and architects and like lots and lots of time to slowly trickle these ideas out into the world.
And now it's all compressed.
And now it's all compressed. And now like we're having conversations. Judith Butler wrote Gender Trouble in like the 90s. And now we're like debating trans issues and we're debating like, is gender performance? And it's just like, I can empathize with people who are like, the world is moving so much faster than I'm prepared for.
Yep. That would explain a lot of the anxiety around it. Doesn't necessarily excuse it, but it does. It doesn't excuse the hostility, but it explains a lot of that. That's really helpful. Putting it in a long view, historical kind of perspective. Yeah, things happen so fast.
And people are resentful of like feeling left behind.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think about this with my dad. My dad, it took me when I was in high school and college, it took me years to get him on board with gay marriage as an idea. And now, like, I don't even know if he would even understand what like trans issues are related to. Like, it's like it was hard enough for him to wrap his head around gay marriage, never mind like trans performativity. And it's just like, so again, to your point, Tom, it's like, I empathize with people who are feeling like the world is moving so quickly and I don't really understand it. And that's where a rhetorical strategy, like, let's go back to the way things used to be when you remembered them and you had you were able to comprehend what was going on in society, something like Making America Great Again. Like, that's a very appealing argument for somebody who's like, I don't know what's going on with America right now. I do know what was going on with America back then, and I like did better that way.
Yeah, and I think that's really, for me personally, honestly, it's helpful to remember that a lot of what's underneath this, just the turmoil that's a part of our world right now, is that it's an honest kind of gut level fear. It's not knowing where things are going, and we have systems in place, entire like ecosystems now that are, to me, it feels like they're built to stoke fear. And I was listening to a podcast last night on my way home from our spring break trip, and this was a point that this one was bringing up, and it was about immigration, and especially more conservative, evangelical conservative fear around immigration. And this gal did just a really masterful job of saying, talk to them, start with their fear. Let's start there. Let's talk about, okay, this is uncomfortable. There's a lot of unknowns. So I think it's a way to honor other people as humans, is to recognize, all right, there's fear in play here. Yeah. And so let's talk about that. So kind of on that note, I have a list of questions. We talked about feminism. I want to throw a bunch of other ideas, words that I think, like feminism, elements of these get cherry picked and held up as, almost like a caricature, right?
Sure.
So male supremacy, Christian nationalism, misogyny, patriarchy, fear, isolation. That's just a short list, but like, okay, so we take all those things. These are all, I call them masculine currents that as men we're swimming in right now. The picture I had when I wrote the question was they used to do a lot of whitewater rafting. And I have been tossed out of boats before in rapids. And I know the feeling of currents that just seem to go everywhere. And it's really disorienting. So that's the picture I had in mind. But how do you see these currents impacting men?
So the two pieces that I want to pick up on are male supremacy and patriarchy. So, just as a background, I think we did this last time. There's definitions if you guys want to go check out the last podcast. But basically, patriarchy, gendered system of social relations that elevates some men to positions of power and authority and keeps women from positions of power and authority. And male supremacy is this ideology that is sort of like your worldview if you thought that the patriarchy was real. So it is, this idea of sexist constellation of beliefs and ideas that rationalizes and justifies the patriarchal social order. And then also the policing, the toxic masculinity that is the policing, harassment, and intimidation of boys and men who step outside of the patriarchal social order.
The man box.
The man box.
Yeah.
So here's how I see these currents sort of working right now. Have you seen Adolescence by any chance?
That was the last question on my list, but go there. Yeah. I hadn't had a chance yet, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I will say, so it's great. You should watch it. There's a lot to say about it. But what I am struck by, and what I've been struck by for the last 9 months since we've talked, Tom, is where, if you're a 15-year-old boy, where on the internet can you go where you're not going to be confronted by male supremacist content? I think about this like fashion, fitness, dating, relationships, video games, sports, even finance, right? With like crypto and NFTs. It's like all of these very normal, very kind of down the middle hobbies and interests that a boy might have. The online spaces that they would go to engage on those topics, there is an element of male supremacist ideology embedded in all of those things. There is a version of male supremacy that is found in all of those places. So I think about like fashion and fitness. Are you familiar with this idea of looks maxing?
Yes. Say more. I've only kind of perused it, but
yeah. So looks maxing it's part of the male supremacist ideology. It's like an outshoot of the kind of incel red pill ideology. But basically, this is the idea that if the most important thing to validating your masculinity is how many women you can bed, then all of your choices about what you wear, how much you work out, how you take care of yourself, how you groom yourself, all of that is done then in service of that goal of how do I make myself as appealing as possible to women for casual sex. And so you can imagine how distorting that is for young men who are trying to have a normal, healthy relationship to their bodies, to their sense of self. I saw something that 30% of young people who have an eating disorder are boys.
Really?
This is very new. And this is like an emerging thing that is really being under discussed. When we think of anorexia and bulimia and eating disorders, we tend to think of women and girls, but it is impacting boys and men just as much, or not just as much, but in a very significant and very high degree. And so looks maxing becomes this kind of outcrop or like sort of outcome of that obsession. And looks maxing is this like pseudoscience where they like bastardize ideas around anatomy and biology and anthropology and psychology and human relationships. All of this is in service of these like absurd standards of attraction and beauty, which surprise, they're all white ethnocentric standards
Well,
of
yeah.
beauty.
So tell me if I'm right. One of the expressions of that is I've seen it on social media, the little like mouth guard kind of thing that you chew on, and as you do, it gives you a Brad Pitt like jawline.
Yep. This is like mewing, is this
Oh,
fake
okay,
idea.
mewing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's this fake idea that you can like, if you chew on like hard gum that somebody is selling you, that some social
yeah,
media influencer is selling you,
yeah.
that you can strengthen your jawline and you're going to have this like, Chad jaw, and then the women will just come flocking to you. Right. And so the idea is that again, it's like the reason that you're single and unhappy and unable to date or have successful relationships is because your eyes are too far apart, or your forehead to cheek ratio isn't correct, or your jaw isn't square enough, or you're not tall enough, or you don't have the right hairstyle. It's like all of this stuff that is biological determinism, right? Where
Yeah.
it ties your genetics to your worthiness as a human and to your
And
masculinity.
as I hear you unpack, I'm like, this is nothing new. This is what my daughters went through.
Yep.
And women have been enduring this and struggling with this for centuries.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think about do you remember in Mean Girls, the movie, like the Tina Fey movie, where she's like looking in the mirror and she's like, one of the characters is like obsessing about her shoulders, like, ugh, my shoulders are so ugly. And the protagonist is like, oh wow, I didn't even know that shoulders were a thing that I needed to be obsessed about. And this is the same mentality,
Yeah.
but it's like comprehensive, and it is so detailed, and there's all these like, oh, she has an angel face and she has a witch face, and like he has got hunter eyes, and it's like, y'all, none of this is real. None of this is real.
Yeah.
None of this is like, this isn't science. This is just people's opinion, but they put it through the lens of this like pseudoscientific language. And so it's very persuasive.
Yeah. And then you have social media to just amplify it. I feel like I saw years ago, like just in my background, I saw an embryonic sort of expression of that in athletics and in the weight room and bodybuilders. I encountered a lot of them, and I'm not gonna lie, I looked at myself in the mirror in the weight room. I didn't necessarily pose, and I wasn't a bodybuilder. I did it because I wanted to play football, but I've been around those guys. And I can remember one guy, he was on my college team, and he was an otherwise really good guy, but really insecure. And one day in the cafeteria, a guy looked at him and said, "Man, Mike, your arms look kind of puny." And I just remember this experience because I watched him, that cut so deep. It was just this brief moment, and then he cussed him out and walked away, and it was over. But for a moment, I saw how deeply that cut him. And now fast forward 45 years, and it's just that much more intense.
Hey, Masculine Wilderness podcast listeners, this is Lauren, your producer. If you found value in our show, we've got an epic opportunity for you. Become an epic ally today and join our fight against human trafficking. Your monthly support not only keeps this podcast going, but also fuels our mission to protect the vulnerable and combat exploitation. For less than one coffee a week, you can make a real difference. Head on over to epicproject.org and choose an amount that works for you. Even $13 a month can change lives. By becoming an Epic ally, you're not just supporting the podcast, you're joining a movement. Stand with us. Let's make an impact together. Thank you.
So just say more about, so you were talking about male supremacy and patriarchy. How do those things intersect with the fear and isolation you talked about, we're living in a fearful time. Like, how do all those things intersect and impact one another? What's the outcome of that
Well,
for
so
men?
you think about you're trying to validate your sense of self as a man. You're trying to make sense. If you're a boy, you're trying to understand what is manly, what is masculine, what is appealing to women that I can be so that they date me and that they have sex with me. And one of the many kind of values of the hegemonic masculine ideal is independence, that you don't build strong, meaningful relationships with people in your life, because that's a sign of vulnerability and that's a sign of weakness. And, in this zero-sum game where everybody's trying to be an alpha and you're going to out alpha me, you don't want to be like, genuine relationships and openness and vulnerability are weakness and are something to be exploited. And so you'll see on these forums, like, never share information about yourself, never let anybody know what's really going on with you. Like, this is such an ethos for young men. There's this really sad research around developmentally, when in a young boy's life do they stop having best friends? And it's like, at a very young age, young men are taught not
at what age?
Like in elementary school. Like already, you can see the kind of shift from like adolescence to preteen, that period of life where young boys figure it out. They figure out, like, oh, this is actually a liability to me. And so often what happens is, especially, there's norms around, like, men not really talking to each other about real stuff. And I'm going to be real, I also have this problem. Like, my best friend and I will, like, I'll get on the phone with him and we'll talk for 2 hours. And my wife will be like, so how is your friend? And I'll be
What'd you talk about?
I mean, we talked about the Knicks a lot. Yeah. We didn't really talk about, what's going on with his life and how is he feeling and how is he doing. Like, so there's that whole aspect of the isolation. Yeah. Then you layer on top of that for men who are indoctrinated into this version of masculinity, the only people that they feel comfortable opening up to and having a meaningful, intimate relationship with are women that they are romantically involved with. So now we can start to build a model of, like, how is it that we get to a place where for these men, relationships with women are like the paramount thing that validates your masculinity. It's like, sometimes because women are the only people that they can talk to, that they feel comfortable being open and vulnerable with, not even sexually, but just like having a real meaningful relationship with, talking about your feelings, talking about your inner world. And so think of how important women become to men like this, how instrumentally important they become, where it's like, it's not even about you. It's like, I need a girlfriend in order to, like, talk about my crappy mom or my brother that I'm really competitive with. Like, women become, this is how we get this, like, discourse around emotional labor that women have to do.
That's exactly what I thought.
Because where else are they supposed to get it?
Yeah. What a heavy burden for women to have to shoulder that emotional load all the time. And it seems like that would explain a lot of the bitterness and hostility that comes out when a man or young man is rejected, right? Because the 100%. Thing he needed to give himself a sense of self said, no, I'm not going to do. Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to do your work for you. It's what it amounts to. But I think I want to go back to what you said earlier, because I think it's important. I'm glad you admitted it first, made it easier for me. But it's hard. It's hard to as men to have those conversations. I was with my little brother this week. He's 55. It's still hard for us. We can get there. We can get there, and we do. but it still takes a lot of work. It does not feel natural,
Right.
Or like it's a skill that's been well developed, and so I appreciate you bringing that up, and I want to acknowledge that for men that are listening. Like you and I are two guys who are maybe doing a little bit more in this space, but it's hard. It's hard for all of us, but it feels so unfair to put that burden. You talked about emotional labor, to put that burden on women. That's just a heavy burden for them to have to carry.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to say spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched Adolescence yet. So you can skip ahead here. But one of the main sort of takeaways for me from that show, one of the things that it really does a great job of sort of showing you how this all happens is like the main character. So you have, it really shows this great, like, foundational characteristics of how this person was raised, and then the environment, and then the ideology, and then the instigating event. So you have a father with explosive rage and anger issues. You have a mother with self-deprecation and sort of constant negative self-talk. You have a boy who goes to a school where there's bullying, there's harassment, there's really bad norms around dating and relationships. So, the boys are passing nudes around of girls, and they're making fun of each other and for not having girlfriends, and sort of bullying each other.
Yeah.
Then you add the male supremacist radicalization that's happening on the internet in isolation, where the parents don't know what their kid is watching. And then you have the instigating event, right? So the story is that this young girl had her nudes passed around, and she's like the school, she's branded as being easy or whatever.
Yeah.
So in the story, Jamie, the main character, talks about like, oh, I saw her out on the town and I thought she was weak. I thought that she was like, because of her self-esteem being impacted by her nudes being passed around in school, she was like vulnerable to me exploiting her low self-esteem and getting her to go on a date with me or getting her to hang out with me. But she rejects him. So he feels like, oh, even this girl who's supposed to be so easy and such a hoe, she even rejects me. And so he feels humiliated and angry, and he lashes out and is violent towards her. Right. And so you can see how the anger, the fear of rejection, and the need for a woman to validate you, and then having that need thwarted and actually being humiliated, that causes such an anger and shame and resentment in that person. Hannah Gatsby in Nanette, she talks about if you hate the thing that you love, or the thing you hate the thing that you need, that causes some real tension in your head.
Yeah.
And it's like, for these men, they both need women's validation, but also they don't respect women. They hate women. And so what does that do to a young man to be put in this position, this cognitive dissonance of like, well, I desperately need women to validate me through sexual experiences in order to be considered a man by myself, like for me to consider myself a man. But I have no respect for women. I think women are manipulative. They're liars. They're whores. They're like, I don't have any respect for this person that I desperately need their validation. And so how do you build a relationship with a person who you don't respect fundamentally? And what does it do to sort of structurally deny yourself respect and validation for your gender identity, the way that you construct it through external needs?
Yeah. So you've got women struggling under the unfair burden of carrying all the emotion, doing all the emotional labor, in relationships, and you've got young men hating the thing that they love. It's just like a recipe for for what we're seeing.
Exactly.
What's actually, I'm going to ask about solutions, but I want to take one sidestep. Tate bros. We talked about that last time. You can go wherever you want with this, but the starting question is, what does their release and freedom, if you want to call it that, mean for young men in America? Or the alternate question, why is their appeal so strong and persistent? You've kind of answered a lot of that already, but like, what is this? Because this is something else pretty monumental that has happened since we first talked, and I know we talked about the Tate brothers.
Yeah. Andrew Tate. God, it's okay. So as I said to you before, I don't want to over-index on the importance of Andrew Tate or the uniqueness of him. Let's say he's just another one of many social media influencers who's peddling the same misogynistic nonsense, the same arguments, and he's very popular. And that's the important part. The important part is that he resonates with young boys, and a lot of people follow him, and when he says something, a lot of people pay attention.
Yeah, he's figured out how to use a big digital microphone for sure.
Yeah. And I'll say the strategy that he uses to get that attention is very simple. He goes, in most of the interviews, he starts with, men are hurting and I'm the only one talking, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you get into grievance, right? You touch on aggrieved parties. Men are suffering, and we should be talking about it.
That's why we're here.
And so it's like Andrew Tate is sort of addresses the front end of the thing, and then all of his solutions are harmful to men. So, and Tom, this is something I really want to emphasize as well, is that, we were talking before about feminism, and like one of the things that's really important to understand about the way that guys like Andrew Tate and male supremacist ideologies operate is that they blame feminism for the faults of patriarchy. It's like men are suffering. It's not the fault of feminism. It's the fault of this regressive ideology that we've all been socialized under for thousands of years. It's not this movement that occurred 40 years ago that has theoretically upended all of human social development. It's like, no, that's not what's going on. Yeah. But you can see how it's actually a very effective argument to be like, well, all we have to do is just go backwards, and we can just pin all of our hatreds and all of our fears and all of our anxieties on feminism. And then we get rid of that, everything will be fine again. And it's like, these guys, they don't have solutions to how to help the mental health of men in America or boys in America. Their solutions are the same solutions that got us to men killing themselves at twice the rate of women, that men being addicted to drugs and alcohol and self-medicating at 3 times the rate of women. Like their solutions are to continue isolating, to continue not building strong, meaningful relationships in your life that are, so it's just to say that like they blame feminism for what they should be blaming patriarchy for.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let the record show that you and I both agree with Andrew Tate on one thing: men are hurting.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's why we're having these conversations.
And I think that this is, to your point or to your question about like what has happened in the last 9-10 months. I think what I have been feeling is that there's this subtle shift where we're starting to recognize that like the boys aren't okay, that the men aren't okay, and that there are harms that come from patriarchy that specifically harm men. And one of the ways that like when we're figuring out what are the solutions to this problem, there's no solution to this problem that doesn't include helping boys and men be happier and healthier and more well adapted to society.
Yeah. What does that look like from an academic standpoint, and what does that look like for you? Like, what does that look like from the laundry room in your house, like at the personal level?
Yeah. So on an academic level, I think that we need to create more spaces for boys and men to discuss issues of masculinity and issues of men in general, just like what does it mean to be a man, without allowing it to devolve into misogyny and hatred of women and blaming of women and grievance-based rhetoric. That's like, how do you create those opportunities? How do you create those spaces? It's very difficult. We're trying at Peril right now to figure out, can we do trainings and workshops? Can we do a train the trainers model? Can we open up peer counseling groups that are, start in very small communities and sort of small niche areas, and that offer people the opportunity to join as they feel comfortable? Can you do it in K-12 spaces? Can you do it in middle school? Like when and how early? When do you introduce digital media literacy to people so that they don't go down those rabbit holes to begin with? These are the kinds of interventions that we're playing around with.
Yeah.
And then on like a real sort of everyday level, I think, to me, the argument I make, and I think I made this last time as well, is like, we have to have so Tom, you and I were talking last time about like, what is the term? Is it positive masculinity? Is it transcendent masculinity?
Right.
So I have been playing around with this idea of like masculine pluralism. Pluralism is not the right one. This is not endorsing this.
This isn't fully cooked, right? This
is a half-baked idea.
Okay.
But it's something to that idea of like, on a real, practical, everyday level, when we talk to boys and men about ways that they can construct their identity, ways that they can be masculine and manly and feel masculine and feel manly, rather than making them choose between different types of ways of being, if we can just say, you get to be your full self, your whole self. You don't have to kill off parts of yourself in order to be a man. You don't have to deny interests or hobbies or desires in order to fit the man box. That's the part of masculinity that I think is so harmful to boys and men. It's like, in order to be a man, you can't cry. In order to be a man, you can't enjoy dance. In order to be a man, you can't order dessert. Like all of these like stupid aspects of masculinity and these standards that we hold our boys to at such a young age.
Yeah.
And it's so harmful to teach boys that you're not okay the way you are at all. You need to do a lot of physical changes, psychological changes, emotional changes in order to be even just like acceptable to broader society. I think about like, when did women start wearing pants? Right? Like 1910?
Yeah.
Harry Styles showed up on a magazine cover wearing a dress, and it was like the end of the world. We're so like, our norms for women are slowly opening up in a way where like sometimes women aren't demonized for having a career or for living alone or for doing things that are not having children, right? But the inverse for men, that we have not made nearly the kinds of strides.
Well, isn't that some of what we talked about at the beginning too, just with the digital culture, that those transitions, that those kind of evolutionary steps, if you will, are compressed. Like they just happen so much faster. Yeah. And it's leaving boys, at a disadvantage. My kids were here. Well, one of my daughters with her kids were here, and my 3-year-old grandson's running around this morning, and it's so like, it's personal for me, not as a dad, but now as a grandfather, because I only have I had 3 daughters. I'm sorry for saying that, apologizing to my daughters. I had 3 daughters, but so now I have little boys running around the house, and I want them to be as, rough and tumble and, whatever as I do, but I also want girls to feel that,
Yep.
and to have that experience. I want boys to feel like they can cry, they can express those emotions. And I'm watching my daughter and her husband now navigate that, and really doing so far a really good job of balancing that out, because I have 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, and so they're getting to play, deal with both sides, as are you now,
Yep.
right? So your son is about 10 months.
Yep.
Do you see, how old's your daughter? She's
Almost 4.
almost, okay. So they're fairly close. Are you noticing differences that seem healthy, or are they just kind of constructed by the culture? Like, because you come at this uniquely as a parent.
Yeah. So I'll say, with the baby, no, like the baby's a baby. He's just doing his baby thing. But with my daughter, what I've noticed is, like, maybe 6-9 months ago, gender started to be part of her play. So like, we were hanging out at a friend's house, and the friend there was like a bunch of kids around, and it was the first time that I'd ever heard the children say something like, "No girls allowed. Only the boys can play with these toys," or whatever. And then later, like a month later, I heard her flip it, and she was like doing the same thing.
No girls allowed.
Yeah, only girls, no boys allowed. Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Like, it's interesting to see the way that at a very young age, in groups and out groups, I mean, we know this from psychology, right? Like, minimal group difference takes very little for people to create, like, my tribe versus your tribe. But it's starting to happen with her with gender. And it's,
it's that impulse, that in group, out group, is that inherently bad, or is it a useful developmental identity?
That's a good question.
Okay, maybe that's for next time then.
I mean, like, the short answer to that is, depends who you ask.
Okay.
Arguably, it's adaptive for us, because it is like, when you are in small tribes and you are in isolated environments, it's very useful to have, like, these are my people, and these people keep me safe. I can rely on these people. I can trade with these people. We can all work together to make sure that collectively our group thrives. And we need to be wary of out-group members. We need to be wary of people who might come in and introduce diseases to us, or might try and take our food, or might try and harm us. And so there's, I frankly hate evolutionary psychology, and like, most of it is just so nonsense. But that is the argument. The argument is that, like, there is something adaptive about consolidating who is on your team. And it takes very little to activate that part of our brains that says, we're all these people, and you're somehow.
Yeah, I think I asked that question more for from like a parent standpoint. Is that when you hear a 4-year-old or 3-year-old talking like that, is that something we come down really hard on, or is it something we just pay attention to it?
Yeah, I think you soft. I mean, whatever. I'm not trying to give anybody parent advice. You guys do whatever you want to do. But I will just say, like, my approach to that is like a softer, like, hey, let's have a conversation about, like, what is it? Why are you doing that? Like, what's going on? Yeah. Are you feeling protective? Are you feeling jealous? Are you worried that somebody's going to take your toy? And if you create a little coalition, maybe they're not going to take your toy.
Parenting, man, if you're not humbled in the process, you're not doing it right. That's my professional advice. Yeah. So, well, Pasha, let me just ask you one last question. And I'm thinking of my friend Alex. He's 19 now, college student, really cares about the things that we have talked about and other guests have talked about. What is your What's your most helpful advice for that 19-year-old guy who is trying to navigate this world? What's the most encouraging thing you could say to him today?
I mean, I would say try and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people who are trying to tell you how to be, how to act, what kind of man you ought to be. I would say if you're 19, try and build strong, meaningful relationships with men and boys in your life. Try and build strong, meaningful relationships with women who you are not trying to have sex with in your life. This is very important. It's you need to have this is one of the reasons that traditional gendered social relations where men and women don't interact a lot, this is one of the reasons that's so harmful, is because you can get into a mentality where it's the only reason that you would engage with a woman is if you're trying to date her or have sex with her.
Right.
To complicate and nuance your relationship and your view of women, one of the easiest ways to do that is to be friends with women. Not try and have sex with them. Never try and have sex with them. Actually,
that's just crazy talk right there.
I know it's tough.
Try to be friends. That's so helpful. I think about my friend Alex often in that regard. So I really appreciate it. Feel like this is an ongoing conversation with you and I, Pasha. I'm grateful for your wisdom, really for your curiosity. You're a curious man. And we need more of those. So thanks for joining us again today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Tom. Happy to come on whenever you want. This is always fun.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.
Good job.